a loyal American, and if you're playing a game, you want to play the game on the side of Western intelligence than the other one. But he was never secretive about it all. And he gets criticism for having narked on people when he was in jail in order to get his sentence reduced, and all those people were like lawyers who helped get him in jail in the first place.
That's right.
And yeah.
Now, here's the thing. Now, in your opinion, last big question. In your opinion, do you think that Riconosciuto and Castellero was killed, Riconosciuto's in jail, because they knew of the existence of Octopus, what it could do and what it was doing?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I believe that. It seems pretty obvious to me that Castellero was killed, that he didn't commit suicide, that was all a trumped-up thing. And, why do that if he wasn't really onto something? But I know also that his attempt was to try to fictionalize it. His book, The Octopus, was going to be fictionalized account of everything that he had learned. But, he acted like an investigative reporter. He actually talked to the people, Robert Booth Nichols and the Hamiltons who created the software, and Riconosciuto, who was involved in this whole periphery where the murders of the Cabazon Indian leaders. I mean, it was all a real murky world that he was looking into, and he thought his saving grace was to fictionalize it. But the people that you're talking to don't know that or even care. They just know that somebody's getting close to where they're at, so he had to die. Yeah. I think that's pretty clear, and that's set out in the Octopus.
How close do you think that the whole Octopus group was to Odessa, the boys in Brazil, that whole, the remnants of the Reich that were still trying to pull strings for those people who had escaped when the Russians and the United States invaded at the end of World War II?
I think there was a serious component that's connected to that. Again, I think that's kind of mapped out in what we call the hagiography chapter in the Octopus, where we examine all the different component pieces and how it kind of fits in.
That's a scary, scary book to read. I was telling folks before you came on, it is really hard to read that and then try to go to sleep. Just saying.
Well, it was a scandal of the early 90s. Castellero died, I think, in 92. But there was a second edition. The book was actually put together by me and my other writer, another kind of famous guy in the marginals press at the time, Jim Keith,
right?
Who's still well known and well loved. And Keith died under very weird circumstances after that. And then there were connections. The promise. It's a long story, believe me. The Promise software was supposedly taken by Hansen, the FBI turncoat guy, and given to and sold to Osama bin Laden. And that's supposedly how bin Laden escaped all those times, because he had the Promise software. He was keeping one jump ahead of them while they were trying to keep one jump ahead of him. So there's the last edition of the Octopus kind of expands it, and there's also a connection to Princess Diana's murder, and that's in the second edition.
Now, why would there be a connection to that, Ken?
It all has to do with Dodi Fayed.
Dodi Fayed?
Yeah, and his father. Again, almost any one of these tributaries is a book in and of itself, and a show in and of itself, and I'm sure we're coming up on time, right?
Well, do you?
Yeah, we have about half a minute.
One question, yes or no. Do you believe that Fayed was connected to the Saudi Arabian connection to the bin Laden family and Osama bin Laden?
I think so. And the real issue for me is he connected to Jim Keith's death? Because Keith died after he was beginning to expose the idea that Diana was pregnant by Fayed.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. There was a photo. I don't know whether you have this photo, but there was a magazine I was reading before she was killed. I was reading it in it's a British tabloid-sized royalty. There's 2 or 3 royalty magazines that are just nothing but royalty, nothing but photographs, and they're kind of higher end than the tabs. And there was a picture of her on the boat, and she was so clearly pregnant because she was a fit woman. She wasn't, she. Pardon?
Well, one thing I should mention is that the Keith's death, and again, it's a lot of detail that we really can't go into, but it is connected to an infection involving Clostridium bacteria. And Keith's books and some of mine, actually the original Maury Island book, were published by a publisher in Georgia named Illuminette, and it was run by a guy named Ron Bonds, who also died of Clostridium bacteria poisoning. And Keith had written about how the CIA has stockpiles of that particular bacteria.
What is that? What is that?
What is that in a nutshell?
What is Clostridium bacteria?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a bacterium. And I don't know, it causes a lethal infection.
Okay, that's the
question. That
question.
would happen in Keith's case. This is all, again, for the listeners who are overwhelmed with detail here, it's in the book. All the details are in the book. In fact, the comment that one critic made about the Maury Island book was that it's information-rich to the point of saturation.
Oh, good. Well,
that's true of the Diana chapter, it's true of the Keith chapter, and plenty of there to keep your...
Yeah, you can get them also as ebooks on Kindle, so that's good. That's how I have them. Okay.
What? Yes, they're on Kindle.
Yeah, they're on Kindle.
Many of my books are on Kindle.
Yes.
I should say, though, I have 15 books, and only like 3 of them are on Kindle. 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And currently, I'm working on. There's a book called Secret and Suppressed 2, which is an anthology of different writings that kind of point you in the directions where I'm at now. Currently, I'm working on some very interesting stuff, again, having to do with television and how the Kennedy assassination was presaged in a television show called Route 66. Wow. As a matter of fact, the whole idea of multiple assassins and stuff was in an episode of Route 66 that was pulled from broadcast the week Kennedy was assassinated.
Huh.
Fascinating. Anyway. Okay, what? We're out of time. And so I want to thank our guest. I want to thank you, Kenn. This has been, no pun, really illuminating. And you can find Kenn's books. Nancy's linking to them. And you can find Kenn's books. Buy them in your bookstore. Buy them from Feral Press.
Or try steamshovelpress.com.
Steam Shovel Press. Go to Steam Shovel Press. Also buy them online. And you can get them from Amazon Books Kindle. So until next week, everybody, thank you, Kenn. Until next week. And we're going to have Kenn back because we've got to get into more of Danny Castellero, more of Octopus, more of Odessa.
We have a lot to talk about.
And more of
Bill and Nancy, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's been a great pleasure. I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks a lot. And from the banks of Primrose Creek in beautiful downtown Solebury, Pennsylvania,